Let's restart this YouTube channel. Let's kick it off by talking about Mount McKinley, or Denali, up in Alaska. So I lived in Alaska for about 10 years. During that time, I had the pleasure of being able to climb Denali, or Mount McKinley. And I see now on my Facebook and social media that a lot of my Alaskan friends have been talking a lot about this. So for those of you that have been living under a rock, on Inauguration Day, President Trump announced that he would be changing the name of Denali back to Mount McKinley, which it formerly was known as for about 100 years. So let's talk a little bit about this controversy, the history of it, and what I think about it. The name Mount McKinley was originally given to the mountain in 1896 when a prospector from the state of Ohio was up in Alaska, saw the mountain, and thought it would be a good opportunity to name the mountain after William McKinley, who then was running for president. William McKinley won. The name of the mountain stuck. It was unofficially called that, but it was called that, I mean, in a large capacity. And then in 1917, which is quite a ways after William McKinley was assassinated, the USGS decided to officially adopt the name Mount McKinley. And the mountain was called that for about 100 years. In 1975, the Alaska government and the senators from Alaska started working to change the name of Mount McKinley to Denali, which a lot of people said was the native name for the mountain and is what it is rightfully called. At this time, there was a state park in Alaska named Denali. There was a national preserve called Denali. There was a highway called Denali. So the name wasn't completely uncommon and out of the local vernacular. And I think for most people, the name Denali and the name Mount McKinley if you were in Alaska, was more or less interchangeable. Now, for me, I didn't live in Alaska. Hell, I wasn't even born in 1975. But when I was growing up, I knew about Mount McKinley. When I was in my early adult years, before I moved to Alaska, I was very interested in mountain climbing, and I read a lot of books about mountain climbing. And the term Denali was not super prevalent. I didn't know the word. When I moved to Alaska, I guess I don't remember for sure if I was aware of the name Denali at all, or if I just learned it right away. But obviously, once I was in Alaska, I learned that the name Denali and the name Mount McKinley was pretty much used interchangeably by the people in Alaska. In 2015, President Barack Obama announced that the name would be changing back to Denali from Mount McKinley, which a lot of people say was the native name and the proper name of the mountain. I remember living in Alaska at that time when this happened, and it was a pretty big deal. A lot of people talked about it. And the thing that I was always kind of curious about is the name Denali itself. So the name Denali comes from allegedly Koyukon, native term meaning the Great One or the High One, which these are the natives that lived in the Yukon, the Kuskokwim, and the Tanana basins. However, there were other native tribes in Alaska, such as the Denali, and the Denali had a completely different name. I think it was like Dagliaka'a. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing this right, but just either way. And these names were the names that the local people called the mountain. But then when the Russians owned Alaska, they had a Russian name for the mountain. And before that, there were Americans that had gotten to Alaska prior to 1896 who saw the mountain, who gave it a different name. So the mountain had a lot of names. William McKinley's assassination basically cemented the name McKinley. It stuck as a way to honor the president who was assassinated. And I thought that was a pretty fitting name. So the name Denali was used in common parlance in a lot of Alaska. There was a state park before any of this controversy that was named Denali State Park. There was previously up until about 1975, a national preserve that was called the Denali National Preserve, which was next to Mt McKinley National Park, which were then combined to create Denali National Park and Preserve. There was a highway called the Denali Highway, and the word Denali appeared in a lot of other things. I mean, there's a bank chain in Alaska named Denali, a lot of things like that. Denali was a pretty common term. However, I don't believe that just because a name is commonly used that you have to change the official name of things. There are a lot of things in the United States, a lot of prominent geographical features that have a lot of history with the people who lived there previously, such as the Grand Canyon or Humphrey Peak in Flagstaff, where I used to live. So Humphrey Peak in Flagstaff has a Navajo name because it has a lot of deep-seated meaning with the Navajo tribe. It also has a Hopi name because it has a lot of deep-seated meaning with the Hopi tribe, and yet it's called Humphrey Peak. And there is obviously a little push to change that name too, but I don't know that we need to go around erasing American history because of perceived wrongs by the American people of the past. Depending on who lived where, those people gave names in their native languages to features all across America. And when we came in, we adopted some of those names. We changed some of those names. And sometimes we just named things after people, like Mount Washington in the state of New Hampshire is named obviously after George Washington. Well, obviously the Native Americans who lived in New Hampshire prior to Americans settling that state had a name for that mountain. Well, I mean, maybe not obviously, but they for sure did. And we shouldn't go around changing everything. It's sort of like doing a land acknowledgement before a public meeting. I view it as appeasing to this group, but I don't think it's necessary. We didn't do anything wrong. That's the crux of the issue there. I feel like there's a part of this where it looks like we're trying to undo wrongs of the past. And sure, there are obviously arguments to make about Native Americans were mistreated. I agree with that. I spent a lot of my last few years living on the Navajo reservation. I really enjoyed my time there. I got to know a lot of Navajo. That being said, like, I understand that the United States government did not do a lot of things right, or did a lot of things that weren't right, and left some of these people in a bad spot. And then generationally, that has caused a situation where maybe they're not as well off as they could be. We could talk about that in another video. I have all kinds of opinions there. But that being said, I don't know that going back and changing the name of everything that's American and like erasing American history is the way to go about doing this. So that, I mean, this is just my opinion. I like the name Mount McKinley. I grew up knowing the mountain as Mount McKinley, as most of you did. If you didn't live in Alaska, the name Denali meant nothing. And there's nothing wrong with calling the mountain Mount McKinley, having it be in Denali National Park and Preserve, which President Trump didn't say he wanted to change the name in Denali National Park, just the mountain. So Mount McKinley in Denali National Park, I think that appeases both groups of people. I think that's a perfectly reasonable compromise. So what do you guys think about this controversy? Do you think it should be called Denali? Do you think it should be called Mount McKinley? Do you think it should be called something else? Just curious what you all think. If y'all like this video, please go ahead and like and subscribe. I'm going to try to make regular content. I'm going to try to do a long form video with good bits of editing, maybe once a week. And in the meantime, I'm going to do more of these short videos that are going to be not very edited and try to produce them daily or near daily or maybe multiple times a day.